Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. I was 35,000 feet above the ground, somewhere between Istanbul and New York, when the notification came through. The plane was dark, cabin lights dimmed, window shades drawn, passengers dozing into contorted sleep poses. My tray table was down with my usual mid-flight setup. Black coffee I didn't intend to drink, my primary work laptop, and a stack of digital reports open like petals on the screen. The message popped up without warning. Not an email, a secure messaging app. That detail alone told me everything. "We don't need you anymore. This message serves as final notice." That was it. No signature, no explanation, just detachment wrapped in digital ink. I stared at it for 2 full minutes, watching the little icon pulse as if taunting me with its silence. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Not here. Not midair. But I didn't panic. I didn't gasp or jolt awake the man snoring next to me. I didn't cry or reach for the flight attendant with trembling hands. Instead, I slid the tray table back up, reached under my seat, and pulled out the second laptop. A matte black shell, plain and untouched. No stickers, no company branding. This wasn't for meetings or slide decks. This was for my plan. I'd had it for months, saved in disconnected chunks, encrypted notes, code snippets, burner emails. I didn't want to need it. But deep down, I knew they'd do this someday. People like them always do. They thought I would fall apart mid-flight. They thought I'd cry into the recycled cabin air and arrive in New York with nothing but a canceled badge and useless frequent flyer miles. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know that 3 of the clients they prized most, companies they paraded in every investor meeting and annual report, weren't loyal to the firm. They were loyal to me. They didn't know about the digital ledger I kept, tracking every instance of intellectual theft, every undocumented overtime hour, every erased contribution with a timestamp. And they sure as hell didn't know I had leverage. I opened the second laptop, logged into a private network, and in less than 60 seconds, the screen lit up with a prompt I had written myself months ago. "Adeline, are you ready?" I clicked yes. Behind me, the cabin murmured with the low hum of engines and sleep. But inside my screen, the gears of something far bigger had begun to turn. The thing about people like them, they think because you're quiet, you're weak. Because you don't shout in meetings or take up space in boardrooms, you don't know how to strike. But I've always known. And this time, it wouldn't just be one person falling. It would be 5 clients, and $3.5 billion worth of business. They fired me in the sky. But I've always worked better at altitude. They didn't fire me because I was bad at my job. They fired me because I was better at it than they were. But it didn't start with fireworks or betrayal. No, it began like a slow leak, so subtle I almost missed it. I used to believe that excellence would protect me. That if I worked hard, stayed sharp, showed up early and left late, I'd be untouchable. I thought results spoke for themselves. I thought success was bulletproof. Then I saved a $400 million deal. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of the fiscal year. Our firm had been chasing this multinational contract for 18 months. Weekly calls, market simulations, thousands of slides, and sleepless nights. I'd built the foundation for it from scratch. Risk modeling, regulatory alignment, long-tail projections. I knew the deal better than anyone. Knew the client's pain points, their internal politics, their CEO's allergies, and even the name of his dog. That's how deep I was. And when the deal stalled, one clause about IP jurisdiction buried so deep in the paperwork that legal missed it, I stepped in. Quietly, uninvited. I rewrote the terms that same night from a hotel room in Geneva, called the client's legal lead directly, and walked her through the updated structure line by line. Not with arrogance, not with pitch deck theatrics, just facts, clarity, and competence. The deal closed the next morning. The email from the client came an hour later. "We were going to walk. Adeline saved this. She's the reason we stayed." At the next all hands, I was celebrated. The partners clapped. My name echoed from the executive balcony like a sermon. I stood there, nodding modestly, my hands clasped in front of me, wearing the same blazer I'd worn for 3 years straight, because I'd never found time to shop. I thought that moment, finally I thought, was when everything would shift. And it did. just not the way I expected. The promotion they'd quietly hinted at in closed-door meetings vanished. The title change I'd been told to expect soon pushed back for review. Instead, they gave me a high-visibility advisory role. Translation: more work, no power. And then the whispers started. She's intense. She doesn't delegate. She intimidates people. But the one that stuck? The one that kept me up? She scares men. Not because I yelled. Not because I stormed into rooms or demanded special treatment. No, I scared them because I asked hard questions. Because I didn't flirt or flatter my way into meetings. Because I corrected mistakes, even when they belonged to someone in a $2,000 suit. I became difficult. Too direct. Not team-oriented. Behind smiles and forced gratitude, the machine was reconfiguring around me, gently pushing me out without ever saying the words. I said nothing. I didn't rage. I didn't file a complaint or write a scathing email. I kept my voice level, my performance high, and my eyes wide open. I let them think I was grateful for the scraps, that I was still hungry for their approval, that I believed the next quarter would be different. But I remembered. Every time they credited my work to someone louder. Every time a male colleague repeated my point 10 minutes later and got applause. Every time they handed me praise with one hand and cut me down with the other. I remembered. And quietly, methodically, I began to prepare. Not for revenge. I'm not a child. For clarity. For power. For the moment they would inevitably decide I was expendable. Because when someone tells you, you scare men, they've already decided you don't belong. And one day, they'll act on it. And when they did, they thought I'd crumble. But they forgot. I designed the scaffolding they were standing on. So while they were polishing their LinkedIn profiles and plotting my exit behind closed doors, I was building something else. Something beneath their radar. Something only I knew how to navigate. I wasn't waiting for a seat at their table. I was carving out my own. And when they cut the cord, when that text came through at 35,000 feet and the sky turned black beneath me, I didn't panic. I opened my second laptop, logged into a network they didn't even know existed, and smiled. It was always going to be someone like him, Matthew Langdon, the kind of name you say out loud at fundraisers and slide into bios like a golden thread, polished, grinning, exempt from consequence since birth. He called everyone champ and wore his tie 2 inches too short like it was a statement instead of a mistake. The CEO's son, but officially Director of Strategy, a title that sounded earned if you squinted hard enough. He hovered around our team like a misplaced intern, occasionally asked questions during meetings that had clearly been fed to him 15 minutes prior. Once asked me what an NPV model was in the middle of a client debrief, then nodded sagely when I explained it like I was quoting the Bible. Everyone laughed at his jokes a little too hard, patted him on the back when he walked into rooms he didn't belong in. You didn't say no to Matthew. You looped him in. You let him take the lead. I watched, silently, like I always did. And then came the summit. The annual Innovation Summit was a big deal, a high-stakes internal pitch event where mid-levels like me had the rare chance to present directly to leadership. Clients were invited to the final showcase, media too. And for once, promotions weren't whispered over drinks at cigar lounges. They were earned in the spotlight. I stayed up every night for 2 weeks working on my submission. It wasn't just a presentation. It was a vision. I built a new cross-market integration strategy based on client segmentation trends I'd quietly tracked for months. I modeled the revenue impact in 3 languages, designed the deck from scratch, and coded a live data simulation just for effect. I submitted it anonymously as required. No names, just a file ID. 2 days later, I saw the finalist list. Matthew Langdon, entry #2074. My stomach dropped. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I logged into the server, found the deck he was presenting, and opened it. And there it was. Mine. Exactly as I'd built it. Same title, same data, same phrasing, even down to the typo I'd missed on slide 12. Integration instead of integration. He hadn't edited a word. I stared at the screen, letting the silence thicken around me like fog. I thought of the hours I'd spent building it, the time I'd skipped dinner, the extra charger I'd bought for airports, The night I fell asleep at my desk because I didn't trust the hotel Wi-Fi. And he took it, claimed it, carried it onto that stage like a trophy he found lying on the floor. When he spoke, he mispronounced half the terms, called my cost conversion model cool, and brushed over the interactive dashboard like it was an afterthought. But the room ate it up. The executive team nodded along like proud parents at a school recital. Someone even said the words, "Finally, a young leader with real ideas." I stood in the back of the room, just another blurred face, clapping quietly with everyone else. And I stayed silent, because I knew how the story would go if I spoke. She's emotional. She's jealous. She's making things up to get attention. And worst of all, she's difficult. It didn't matter that I had the original file timestamps, that I had every edit saved, every version logged. I could already hear the dismissal in their voices, the tight smiles, the condescension wrapped in concern. They weren't interested in facts. They were interested in comfort. And Matthew Langdon was comfortable. So I played my part. I smiled in meetings. I nodded when Matthew told me, "We make a good team." I offered to tighten up his follow-up presentation for the client showcase. He called me detail-oriented. I called it surviving. But that night, I went home and stood in my kitchen, the light from the refrigerator casting long shadows as I stared into nothing. I thought of every time I'd stayed quiet, every time I'd let them take the credit, the stage, the applause, every time I'd been told to wait my turn, be patient, be humble, be nice. And I made a decision. No more. The game was over, not in a blaze of fury, but in something colder, sharper. I wasn't going to fight for scraps anymore. I was going to take the whole table and set it on fire if I had to. Because the truth was, they hadn't just stolen a deck. They'd stolen time. They'd stolen recognition. They'd stolen the version of me who still believed silence was a strategy. But the woman they thought they could erase, she was just getting started. By day, I smiled. By night, I built. Not out of vengeance, though no one would have blamed me, but out of necessity, out of truth. Because here's the secret no one likes to admit. Most of us don't leave because we're angry. We leave because we're done pretending. I didn't want to show them. I wanted to stop needing them. So I began quietly, slowly, deliberately. It started with a spreadsheet, a simple list of names, people I had worked with over the years who were too bold, too honest, too sharp for the system to tolerate, engineers whose ideas had been stolen, strategists passed over for promotions they trained others to take, lawyers who refused to look the other way during internal alignments, people like me, people who didn't fit the mold because they were too busy redesigning it. I started reaching out, one call at a time. Each conversation began the same way. "Hey, quick question. If you could build something from the ground up, no red tape, no hierarchy, just skill and trust, would you?" The first time I asked, there was a pause. Then a slow, almost stunned, "God, yes." They didn't ask about money. They didn't ask who was backing me. They just said the same thing, over and over. I thought I was the only one. By the third week, there were 8 of us. A former data scientist from Berlin who'd been forced out after refusing to massage the numbers for an investor pitch. A sharp-witted attorney from Chicago who left after she was reprimanded for calling out gender discrimination in a boardroom. A product manager from Singapore who designed a logistics tool that saved her company millions, only to be replaced by the boss's cousin. We met in encrypted rooms, shared files through secure vaults, built under false company names and disposable email aliases. We weren't hiding because we were afraid. We were hiding because we were dangerous. We weren't starting a business. We were starting over. No bureaucracy. No 6 layers of approval for a single decision. No one with power just because their last name matched a door. We built the new system in pieces. Modular, agile, brutally efficient. A digital infrastructure that could scale globally but still treat humans like humans. Contracts written in plain language. Benefits that weren't perks, just basic respect. Ownership structures that meant something. No founders above criticism. No culture fit that meant people who won't challenge us. And it wasn't just ideas, It was working. Every week, someone else joined. A back-end developer who once maintained a billion-dollar system and now coded from a cabin in Oregon. A marketing lead who tripled engagement at her last job and got laid off after asking for maternity leave. A project manager who was told he was too empathetic to lead. Each one brought stories, wounds, yes, but also skills. Fire, focus. We weren't broken. We had just outgrown the cage. I named the project Fourth Flight, not because I was on a plane when it all snapped, but because sometimes it takes 4 tries before you stop waiting for the landing and start building your own wings. No press, no launch parties, just purpose. I still showed up to work every day at the firm like nothing had changed, sat through meetings, took notes, played my part. But every night, I laid another brick. The house they built had doors that only opened for the chosen few. Ours? We were building without doors at all, just open sky. Tokyo was first. A 6-hour strategy session at a waterfront boardroom overlooking the Sumida River. Sleek, silent, immaculately choreographed, until the final hour when the chairman of a global supply chain firm leaned in across the polished table, folded his hands, and said softly, in English so clear it didn't need translation, "We trust you, Adeline, not the company you came from." That was the moment I knew the walls were already cracking. I didn't answer right away, just held his gaze and let the silence settle between us. He slid the contract back toward me, unsigned. "You'll let us know where to send it, when you're ready." Not if, when. London came next, a fintech client I'd advised for nearly 3 years. We met at their new headquarters in Shoreditch. Exposed brick, kombucha on tap, all the usual startup camouflage hiding a board of billionaires. After 2 hours of strategic revisions, I presented a risk matrix I'd built in my apartment 2 nights before. The CFO stared at the figures for a long time. Then she smiled, slow, knowing. "Adeline, if you ever go solo, we're in. Full portfolio." She didn't even blink when she said it, like it was already decided. I thanked her, politely, professionally. But something stirred in my chest. A quiet, steady click. Then Sao Paulo. A climate tech firm I'd helped stabilize through 3 volatile quarters. We were on a video call, the connection spotty, but the message crystal clear. The CEO, a direct man with a background in engineering and not much patience for fluff, said it mid-call like he was confirming the weather. "We'll follow you, Adeline. Not them. Tell us where." And that's when I stopped pretending. I stopped signing NDAs that tied my tongue. I stopped nodding when execs paraded my work as a team effort while sipping whiskey I paid for with sleepless nights. The next deal that crossed my desk, one worth more than any bonus they'd ever offered me, I didn't send it to legal. I signed it myself, not on behalf of Langdon and Fisk, not under their logo, not with their email signature, just mine. Adeline Shaw. For once, my name wasn't buried in a slide footnote or whispered in the corner as someone else took a bow. It was on the front page. I took a deep breath after I hit send. Sat back and watched the confirmation roll in. The moment felt surreal. Not because I'd closed another deal. I'd done that 100 times before, but because it was mine. Completely, irreversibly mine. The legal team never saw it. The partners never smelled the smoke. And yet, the fire had already started. Because when clients start saying your name louder than the firm's, the brand stops being theirs and starts becoming yours. There was one document. One small, overlooked detail that became the thread I would pull to unravel the entire curtain. It wasn't scandalous, not dramatic, just undeniable. A digital audit log. Buried deep in the company's internal archive system, wrapped in layers of permissions and outdated security, it was a simple metadata record of submission timestamps and document origins. The final version of the quarterly strategy deck, the one Matthew had presented, the one he was praised for, the one that secured our company's largest contract in a decade, was created by me. Not just the original slides, the final file, created on my laptop, my user ID, my encrypted IP address, with version control that showed edits only by me. Not even IT could fake that. The system was old, clunky, and rarely used since they moved to cloud-based collaboration. but it still ran in the background like a forgotten witness, logging every keystroke and file change for compliance. They'd forgotten it existed. I hadn't. I discovered it 2 months before my last flight, by accident, while trying to pull archived data for a client. And when I saw it, I saved a copy, then two, then uploaded it to a server only I could access. It became my shield, not to swing, but to hold. So when the gala invitation arrived, an annual event where the firm showcased its rising stars and patted itself on the back in designer suits, I accepted. Not because I wanted the free champagne or the awkward small talk with men who called me Miss, despite my portfolio being 3 times the size of theirs. I went because I knew what was coming. The evening was held at a rooftop venue in Midtown, lights strung above like an expensive constellation. The skyline stretched in every direction, impressive, blinding, forgettable. They made the announcement just after dessert. The CEO stepped up to the stage, beaming like a proud father, microphone in hand. This year, we're thrilled to announce our newest Vice President of Strategic Innovation, Matthew Langdon. Applause erupted. Wine glasses clinked. Someone to my right gasped, "Wow, already?" As if he hadn't been groomed for this since birth. Matthew took the stage, all charm and practiced humility. He made a speech about hard work, dedication, collaborative spirit, quoted Steve Jobs, thanked his father, thanked the incredible team that helped make it all possible, though he never named a single person. I stood just 5 feet away, a glass of champagne in my hand, smiling like I'd been sedated. Because I already had a new ticket. Not metaphorically. A real one. Tucked into the inside pocket of my coat. A one-way flight booked under a personal LLC. Destination redacted. Purpose undisclosed. No return leg. The company didn't know yet. Neither did my colleagues. They thought I was still in the race, but I had already crossed the finish line. The clients that mattered had signed directly with me. The new system was live in a sandbox environment, outperforming every benchmark I'd ever built under their name. And the people I trusted most, the ones who'd been discarded like I had, they were waiting for me. I watched Matthew accept his applause, flashbulbs, hugs, laughter that reeked of champagne and legacy, and I thought, they're congratulating him on a future that no longer includes me. But that's the thing. I no longer included them either. When the music swelled and the crowd began to disperse, I slipped away. No dramatic exit, no speech, no confrontation, just a quiet step off their stage, and into my own. It happened somewhere over the Atlantic, somewhere between a sleepless night in New York and an early sunrise in Zurich. Flight 144. My 4th that month. I'd just finished editing a proposal for a tech accelerator in Geneva, $500 million in funding, 6 countries, and my fingerprints on every inch of the model. I closed the file, leaned back, and let my eyes rest for a moment. That's when the message came. It wasn't an email. It was a push notification through the firm's secure channel, one we only used for emergencies or high-level transitions. My heart didn't race, not right away. I thought maybe a client had canceled a meeting, maybe a last-minute shift in compliance. But when I opened it, the words were short, final, surgical. Your contract is terminated immediately. You are no longer authorized to access internal systems. Please refrain from further contact with clients. Just like that. No explanation, no context. No, thank you for your years. Just digital silence where my career used to be. I sat still for a full minute, the hum of the engines drowning out the low panic swelling in my ears. Then, like I was watching someone else's hands move, I reached for my laptop and disconnected. I logged out of Slack, closed my company inbox, wiped the cloud folders I'd mirrored to my device for offline work. I shut down. Everything. No resignation email, no goodbyes, just gone. I didn't need their systems. I didn't need their headlines, because they had just made the worst mistake of all. They assumed influence was something you could revoke with access. They thought control meant possession. But what they never understood, what they never could, was that I had already slipped through their fingers long ago. Because influence isn't stored on a server. It lives in relationships. It lives in trust. It lives in conversations that don't happen on record. The truth was, they hadn't been my lifeline for a long time. My clients were. And those clients? They didn't care what company name was on my badge. They cared that when they called at 11 p.m. with a logistics crisis, I answered. They cared that when the numbers didn't add up, I found the leak before their auditors did. They cared that when the future looked uncertain, I built them a roadmap so precise they could see the daylight again. You can revoke a password, you can revoke a title, but you can't revoke trust. And they had failed to grasp that. By the time the plane touched down, I already had 4 voicemails on my personal line, 1 from Tokyo, 1 from Sao Paulo, 2 from London, all variations of the same sentiment. We just heard, wherever you go next, we're following. No one asked what happened. They didn't need to. They knew. They had seen it before. Sharp people stripped for parts, their brilliance packaged and sold without credit, then discarded when they no longer fit the narrative. But I hadn't fit the narrative for a long time. And now, for the first time in years, I didn't have to pretend I did. I was free. Not fired. Freed. I took a cab straight from the airport to a quiet apartment I'd been renting under a shell company for 6 months. Just in case. Not because I was paranoid, because I was prepared. I poured a glass of water, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the blinking cursor on my open screen. The firm thought I'd vanished. But in reality, I was just becoming visible again. Not as a project lead, not as a strategist hiding behind someone else's title, as myself, as the woman who had already built the next thing in silence, as the woman they couldn't control anymore. And as I stared out over the city lights, I thought one quiet, certain thought: let them keep the building. I'd taken the foundation dot. The sky was the color of bruised concrete when I arrived at the building for the last time. Not as an employee, not as a strategist, just Adeline. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't need an audience. I only needed to see it with my own eyes, to mark the moment when the past officially ended. I walked up the familiar stone steps, pulled my coat tighter against the wind, and slid my ID badge from my bag. It was still clipped to the same black lanyard I'd worn for years. The edges were frayed, the surface dulled from countless scans. It still carried the weight of 1,000 hours logged behind meeting room doors, the scent of coffee-fueled deadlines, and the ghost of ideas that once lit up this place like fire. I raised the badge to the scanner by the revolving door. A soft beep. Red light. I frowned and tried again. Beep. Red. No vibration. No error message. Just rejection. Clean and quiet. As if the system itself didn't recognize me anymore. For a second, I waited for someone from the front desk to notice, to call out with confusion or concern. But Marcus, the morning security guard who used to greet me with "looking sharp, eh?" and sneak me muffins from the back, just looked away. His eyes flicked toward the marble floor. His hand gripped the edge of the desk. He'd been told. Of course he had. I stepped back, heart strangely still. No fury, no shock, just the numb certainty that the erasure had already begun. I turned my gaze to the wall beside the lobby, the recognition wall. Dozens of names etched in frosted glass tiles. Directors, VPs, award winners. My tile had been added 2 years ago. 6th row, 3rd from the right. Now? It was blank. Wiped clean. No residue, no outline. Like my name had never existed there at all. They hadn't replaced me. They had deleted me. I stood for a moment in the lobby's silence, the air thick with artificial citrus and quiet betrayal. Behind me, employees buzzed through turnstiles. Phones rang. Heels clicked. Business as usual. No one stopped. No one looked. But I felt the weight of every pair of eyes avoiding mine. The woman from HR who once cried in my office after being passed over for a promotion she earned. The junior analyst who used to slip me sticky notes with sharp insights during strategy reviews. The executive assistant who once thanked me for defending her in front of a room full of suits. They all saw me. And they all turned away. Because in places like this, power is proximity. And mine had been revoked. I didn't wait for the awkward confrontation. I didn't demand entry. I just turned, my shoulders square, and walked back out into the rain. It was gentler now, mist more than storm, soft like an exhale. Across the street, I ducked under a coffee shop awning and pulled out my phone. 3 names. I typed them one by one. People I knew were still trapped inside. People who had brilliance smothered under bureaucracy, ideas suffocated under someone else's ego. People like I used to be. And to each of them, I sent the same message. 4 words, no context, no signature. The door is open, for you. It was an invitation, not a plea. A signal fire, a whisper through the cracks in their carefully sealed windows. Because I knew what it meant to sit at your desk with clenched teeth, watching someone less competent be celebrated. To silence your instincts, to dilute your voice, to wonder if maybe the problem was you. But it wasn't. It never had been. I waited in that doorway long enough, held it open as long as I could. Now I was building something different. A place where talent wasn't punished for shining too bright, where strategy didn't mean politics, where trust wasn't a marketing slogan, but the foundation itself. And if they chose to come, there would be no badge required, no nameplate needed, just the simple understanding. This time, we build the thing they never let us touch. The firm was calling again. It started with a single email, thinly disguised as friendly concern. Hey Adeline, just checking in. There seems to be some confusion on the Sao Paulo files. Any chance we could sync up this week? Would love your take on a few things. Hope all is well. I didn't reply. The next day, there was a voicemail from one of the partners I hadn't heard from since the gala. Adeline, hi. Look, I think there's been some crossed wires with London. They've gone dark on our end. Completely dark. I'm hoping you can shed some light. We really value your insight. Then came the LinkedIn message from the CEO's chief of staff, the same woman who once sent me a performance review that said I needed to soften my delivery in client meetings. Hi, Adeline. We miss having you around. Would love to catch up. There's some concern internally about a few accounts. Let's reconnect soon. The language was carefully chosen, measured, polite. But behind every word, I could hear it. Panic. Because by then, they had noticed the shift. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It was quiet. All 3 of their cornerstone clients, Tokyo, London, and Sao Paulo, had suddenly gone. Still. No formal cancellations. No angry emails. No feedback surveys filled with scathing reviews. Just paused meetings. Postponed updates. Contracts that sat untouched, unsigned, like they'd been left out in the rain. The firm scrambled, trying to make sense of it. They checked systems, blamed it, resent calendar invites, looped in junior analysts, scheduled internal war rooms. But they weren't looking in the right place, because while they were scrambling for answers, the decision had already been made. Each client, independently, without prompting, had already signed with me. The Tokyo firm routed their contracts through my encrypted portal and transferred their entire data log to our new system. No questions asked. The London team onboarded my analyst within 48 hours and rerouted all deliverables to a new email domain, one with no ties to the firm they just ghosted. And Sao Paulo? They sent a message through one of their executives, a single sentence. We believe in people, not brands. They never mentioned the firm, not once, because what needed to be said had already been said. In silence. No press release, no headlines, just a quiet, collective shift of loyalty. And they didn't even ask me to explain what happened. They already knew. They had seen it happen too many times, to other women, other strategists, other voices that were too sharp to be contained. They didn't leave because I begged them to. They left because they recognized something the firm never did. That influence doesn't come from a logo. It comes from trust. And trust, real trust, isn't built with slide decks or holiday gift baskets. It's built with 2 a.m. emails when a supply chain collapses. It's built with years of consistent results, delivered without excuses. It's built when you sit across from a CFO during a crisis and say, I've got you. And when I left the firm, I didn't take anything from them. No files, no contacts, no corporate assets. But they lost everything that mattered. And now they were trying to pull me back. Not out of regret, but fear. Because the contracts were more than just revenue. They were reputation. And without those clients, the firm's shine started to tarnish. Investors noticed. The board started asking questions. The press caught wind of a strategic freeze in their international division. Still, I said nothing. No response, no retaliation, just silence. because sometimes silence is the loudest answer. It says, I see you. I'm not coming back. You don't matter anymore. And that's what scared them most. The conference in Munich was the last thread. They didn't know it yet, but I did. It was the annual Strategic Futures Summit, 3 days of panels, private negotiations, and sealed contracts disguised as dinners. Leaders came from every continent. The council that hosted it, the Global Systems Board, was exclusive, private, unofficial, but powerful. Membership wasn't about status. It was about influence. And influence was something the firm was rapidly losing. Their final foothold was a renewable infrastructure agreement, a massive multilateral deal spanning 4 countries and nearly $3 billion in impact. They'd been working for years to get it past the final vote. It was their last card, their last claim to global relevance. I arrived quietly. No entourage, no badge that screamed legacy, just my name, Adeline Shaw. I wasn't invited to speak at the opening. They didn't know how to place me, too recent to be royalty, too present to be ignored. I didn't mind. I wasn't there to make noise. I was there to be seen. And that moment came on day 2, behind closed doors. The final deliberation was scheduled. The room was small, 12 decision-makers, 2 observers per party, 1 lead per company. Langdon and Fisk came in polished. Matthew was among them, still clinging to the title he'd been handed. His father was not there. Rumors said he'd been sidelined. Whispers followed him now instead of praise. They laid out their case for why they should retain leadership over the deal. They cited legacy, global presence, resources. And then, like an afterthought, they mentioned the original strategist who designed the foundational architecture. They didn't say my name, because they didn't dare. I stood up. The moderator looked over, surprised. I wasn't scheduled to speak. Adeline Shaw, I said calmly. Founder, 4th Flight Systems. Murmurs. I walked to the center of the room, placed a slim folder on the table. Inside, the complete restructuring plan for the agreement. A modernized infrastructure model that addressed all the inefficiencies their version ignored. Backed by new tech, local partnerships, and the 3 clients who had already transitioned to my firm. Then I looked directly at the council. This deal will move forward, but only under our leadership. If Langdon and Fisk proceeds, I withdraw. So do my clients. So does 61% of the projected capital. Silence. A deep, wide silence. Matthew's face froze, a smile twitching and then vanishing. Someone on the board spoke. You're giving us an ultimatum. I shook my head. I'm giving you a choice. They didn't deliberate long. Votes were cast, quietly, firmly. 4th Flight was chosen. Langdon and Fisk was removed from the council partnership list, effective immediately. Matthew resigned that evening. The statement was carefully worded. Personal reasons. New chapter. But everyone knew. He hadn't failed because he was untalented. He failed because he'd never built anything real. I flew home the next day, alone, first row, 1 laptop. At customs, I received a ping on my phone, an update from the Global Systems Board's internal platform. A photo had been uploaded from the Munich event. A new name had been added to the influence wall. Adeline Shaw. No plaque, no speech, just presence. The kind they tried for years to erase. But this wasn't revenge. This wasn't about proving them wrong. This was about something simpler. I didn't let them destroy me. And that was enough. Because in the end, the greatest disruption wasn't a scandal or a lawsuit or a leaked memo. It was me refusing to disappear, choosing to lead, and daring, finally, to take up the space they spent years trying to collapse.